All right, there we go. Okay, some admin notes, please. The latrines, I'm still in the Army, sorry. The, the lavatories are out those double doors to the left, make another left, and the third left, and both the men and women are appropriately placed. There's some snacks in the back, water in the back. You're welcome to them. And should you have any questions, don't hold them. Just go ahead and raise your hands, get the mic, and I'll answer the questions, or the folks that are providing additional support will answer the question as well. So we'll go through introduction of participants and organizations, right? Again, Ian Thomas, Army BRAC office. And we're going to start back here, and they'll give their, and we'll use the mic.
Good evening. I'm Kathy Baker. I'm with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and I'm the project manager supporting Ian and Scott.
Scott Smith. I'm the site manager for the Army, and I work for the BRAC office.
That's just for the live stream. I'm sorry. It's just for the people at home.
Okay, so we need to speak up then. So make sure you speak up.
I'm Scott Smith. I'm the Army site manager on the installation. I work for the BRAC office.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Quan Nguyen. I am with the Army Environmental Command, and I support with the funding of the work that's going on at Sunflower.
Okay, so that's the entities that are responsible for the remediation at the site. Next slide. Well, this is the agenda we're going to follow. You know, we just talked about participants and organizations. We'll talk about the Restoration Advisory Board. The participants and organizations, again, BRAC, AEC, USACE, co-briefers, so whatever questions come up that I can't answer, one of the folks in the back will do so. We'll go over objectives, background and map overview, site remediation, the Army process, munitions, explosive remediation, decontamination summary, contracts and the current status, groundwater update, and then any questions on progress and the end of presentation. So I'll move to the next slide, the other way. Okay, Restoration Advisory Boards. This has been talked about for a while. All right, the goal of the board is to provide information and answer questions about Army Restoration Advisory Boards, okay? All right, the RAB provides the community with the opportunity to become involved in the environmental restoration process. That's the bottom line. Either as a member of the RAB or participation at the public meetings. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but I just want to highlight a few things here. So right here, because representative of the environmental agency is overseeing cleanup, participate in the RAB, and that's the EPA, the Army, and the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, KDHE. Okay, the RAB offers members and the public the opportunity to share their questions, concerns, and ideas with those agencies. Next slide. Okay, so we executed an updated solicitation this past January, February. And, you know, we sent out the information to the local newspapers, right, to the media outlets and websites, and we sent out emails to folks. I think a lot of you have received some of those emails. We received 34 expression of interests, right, which is a lot higher than we have had in years past. Okay, based on that response, the Army has decided that there is sufficient interest to form a Restoration Advisory Board for Sunflower Ammunition Plant. We then requested confirmation from those said 34 persons, and we received 25 confirmations back. So again, we will initiate the Restoration Advisory Board, and the first board meeting is tentatively scheduled to occur late October, early November. And that's the bottom line on the RAB for Sunflower. So you'll be getting, those of you here who expressed interest, you'll be getting, likely be getting a call just to give you additional information on the establishment of the RAP. Okay, the objectives of this specific meeting, right, to advise you and inform you of the overall progress of our remediation activities at Sunflower, and to provide you with a status of the cleanup as we go through. Background. Some of you have seen this before. I'll just highlight some of this. You know, the installation, the installation was listed as excess in 1997 and transferred to Sunflower Redevelopment in 2005. We transferred the entire acreage of Sunflower, 9,065. We executed some contract actions, right, for cleanup. That contract essentially was to clean up roughly 5,300 of that 9,600 acres, meaning that 26, almost 3,000 acres was transferred clean. Sunflower Redevelopment, the landowner, right, conducted the cleanup until 2011, and then funding was exhausted. In 2015, the Army determined that we need to come back in and clean up the site. Since that time, we've awarded 14 contracts valid over $200 million to remediate the site. So these 14 contracts, this number, $200 million, is actually the contract costs. We have actually expended a little bit more than $200 million in remediating Sunflower to date. Next slide. Okay, this is the remediation process, the Army process, that is. And again, the three organizations that are represented here, BRAC, Army Environmental Command, and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Corps of Engineers, again, this is critical here, the contracting activity, the oversight, and contract execution. Without the Corps, we would not be where we are today. Okay, Army process continued. You know, our cleanup of Sunflower is governed by federal law. So everything we do, we report back to an entity that gets that information back to Congress in some way, shape, or form. You know, the Kansas congressional delegation has always had an interest in the cleanup of Sunflower, and oftentimes we have had to go and brief them specifically about what we're doing, when we're going to do it, and what the current status is. This is also critical here, the Defense Environment Restoration Program. And we talk here about accelerating site cleanup with priorities provided by SRL to the maximum extent possible. Now, Sunflower, for any type of funding, whether it's Defense Environmental Restoration Program funding or Operation and Maintenance Army funding, we have to compete. Sunflower has to compete with every other entity within DOD. And sometimes, most times, that is a significant challenge. Okay. The explosive decontamination work, that's where we have contaminants, or not contaminants, but explosive like nitrocellulose, nitroglycerin, and nitroguanidine that has to be taken care of before we can turn the site over for beneficial use. So the explosive decontamination created explosive safety arcs where only the explosive work can occur, and then we have to wait for the environmental remediation, you know, to occur once the explosive decontamination is complete. Now that we are essentially complete with the explosive decontamination, we can site-wide, you know, execute the environmental remediation. Okay, I know you've seen the maps around the room, and I've seen a number of you have gone to them to take a look at it. If you have any specific questions about the map and what it's represented, Uh, feel free to ask. So go back here. Again, wrong button. The boundary of Sunflower in blue. The response sites, different colors. Some of these colors here represent where we have apportioned various acreage to various universities. The green was apportioned, dark green was apportioned to Johnson County, right, as part of the transfer. And the light green are most of the areas in general that were either clean, did not have any contamination associated with it, or has since been cleaned or remediated by the Army and SRL. Okay, munitions and explosives summary. In 2015, when the Army came back in to execute the cleanup, we estimated that these numbers, this is what we had to work with. These are the types of numbers that were put together. A scope was written, a performance work statement was written, and we got contractors out there to bid on executing the remediation of these areas. So concrete, sewer lines, outside and inside sewers. And our prime contractors were Zapata and Sevenson. The MEC work that was physically completed as of December 2023 is reflected here. So we're pretty close to our estimation of concrete that had to be removed. The total concrete removed over almost 5 million square feet of concrete. Pretty close again here to the estimate of linear feet of inside sewer lines. And really close here as well for the outside sewer lines, and that's the total. The MEC work is now complete. All of that work was done between 2015 and 2023, so 8 years. Just a few pictures of the site itself. You know, you see here before, during, and after. So we get after foundations, footings. As you can see, the depth in some of these areas, represented by this gentleman right here is standing. And so these side walls here are about 10 feet high. And this is the result after a couple of years of working in this area. Some of the issues that we encountered as we go through the remediation. You can see here we have 3 layers of pipe, and each one of those pipes have to come out. So you're digging pretty deep. You know, pipe number 1, storm sewer, recovered nitrocellulose water is the pipe number 2, and acid sewer pipe number 3. And these constitute delays in executing the remediation at the site. You have a deep acid sewer trench after pipe removal. Again, additional work that was done to address the explosive hazard. Restoration at the bottom. This is a pretty wide picture of AOC 16 during the remediation. And this is AO 16, another section of AOC 16 after the remediation. Okay. As we indicated previously, we awarded 14 contracts over $200 million. We still have a lot of work to do. And we do expect and anticipate awarding additional contracts in the next 12 to 18 months. But I made the point to highlight this statement here, subject to availability of funds. Okay. Again, Sunflower has to compete with the rest of the Army, the rest of the Department of Defense for cleanup dollars. And we will continue to do so. Our goal is all soil cleaned up at Sunflower by 2028. Whether we'll make that or not is another challenge. But again, as long as we have the funding that is necessary, we should come pretty close. But when we do fall off of this particular goal, or it doesn't look like we'll make the timeline, we will inform all involved. Okay, this is our current status as of 1 July. Pretty significant. Again, 97 sites require RCRA corrective action. 97 sites require some form of remediation. We have 56 sites that are remediation complete. That is a significant undertaking. This is also significant. We are 24 sites that were removed from the RCRA permit. Those 24 sites allowed the landowner to start redevelopment activities at the site with the anticipation that as you redevelop one area, then that will beget additional redevelopment. So we're working very hard at getting more of these sites removed from the RCRA permit. Again, removing the sites from the RCRA permit allows for the landowner to get after redevelopment. These are some technical comments here. SHMU 4142 closed under solid waste landfill permit as opposed to being closed under the RCRA permit. Here, 17 sites have been approved from KDHE for no further action. Only the consent order cleanup remains. Now, what does that mean to you? So the Army is responsible to continue to clean the site up and ensure that the soils are remediated. Part of the conveyance agreement that occurred between the Army and the landowner, actually the landowner and the regulators, is that there are certain things that the landowner has to do to satisfy the regulators to ensure that at some point you can get no further action completely for the entire site. So that's the consent order cleanup requirements, and that is codified in a document between SRL and KDHE. We do have 11 additional sites awaiting approval for no further action. And here, 41 sites remain at various stages of remediation site-wide. So these sites, 41, we're going to be working on in some capacity for the next 4 years with the intent of completing the soils remediation at Sunflower. We also have groundwater operable units, which the requirements, we have 5 of those, and that specifically is to investigate the groundwater at Sunflower and get at whatever contaminants may be resident there based on the work that the Army has done and the mission that the Army had here all those years. Okay, speaking of groundwater, this next 4 slides are going to talk a little bit about the groundwater situation. So what we do is to characterize the groundwater, and these are the 3 areas with which we will execute the characterization. We'll determine and delineate, which is the extent of where the contamination is, and we also determine if the groundwater is potable. That's key. So groundwater, no further action can be determined through no contamination, contamination below the target media cleanup levels, and non-potable aquifer risk evaluation, or a combination of the 3. This is going to be extensive. These 3 actions here are going to be extensive for the next 4 years. The 5 operable units, okay? Operable unit 1, 2, and 3, the conceptual site model is complete. The conceptual site model will inform us of exactly what it is we need to do going forward. We have a snapshot of the current state of groundwater contamination in 3 OUs. Additional RFI delineation and characterization will stem from the results of the investigation. This particular OU here, OU4, the work plan has been approved by KDHE, and characterization of OU4 will begin in the fall of 2024. OU5, the work plan for OU5 is under Army review. Okay, so the objective, bottom line, is to shrink the boundaries of the OUs. And I'm remiss here, we have a poster board that identifies the operable units. Yellow, blue, green. And we have this area down here has an operable unit as well. And here we have an operable unit. The operable unit here was shrunk considerably. So we're going to be working on these areas. These small dots that you see here are representative of wells that can be found throughout the installation, right? These are monitoring wells found throughout the installation. Once we go in and we start to remediate the site, say for instance, those sewer pipes that you saw earlier, once you dig those out, underneath those sewer pipes, we go down and we get samples of the soil, right? And test the soil samples and identify the levels of contamination that are there. The target media cleanup levels, we have to achieve that before we can get a no further action from the regulators. So SHREWs and AOC, so solid waste management units and areas of concern with no further action on groundwater as agreed to by the regulators, we have 19 of those. We will propose an additional 40 sites for no further action for groundwater. Okay, groundwater contaminants, and it says versus residential TMCLs. The use of residential TMCLs is to identify what can remain in the soil that is not a risk to human health and environment. Okay, so everything that we'll do will be based on getting whatever contamination that's currently resident in the soil to be below this number. We have nitrate contamination on site. We have guanidine nitrate contamination, chromium, fluoride, lead, nitroguanidine, TPH, and that's from gasoline, and pesticides. And you can see the highest detections are listed here that we have so far, and how far we have to go to ensure that what remains is not a risk to human health and the environment. Okay, this is our website. Essentially everything that we have done so far is accessible through this website. This meeting presentation will be added to the website, so you can refer to it in the future. So your feedback on whether there's additional information about the cleanup, we need your feedback. You can provide that in an email that you've received previously from Scott Smith, or you can identify your issues and send it to this mailbox. As it says here, we're here to answer your questions, and you can also reach us later by emailing that site. This concludes this short, brief update on what we have done over the last year or so at Sunflower. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Is the water quality in the creeks on the property tested as well as in the wells?
Is the water quality in the creeks tested as well as the wells?
We test any area we're digging in, we're testing the water that's coming off of that area. And there will be a stream study done on the entire property after, we're actually getting that this fall. So, yes.
And are the expectations the same for the creeks as for the wells?
Surface water, a little bit different from groundwater, but there's still a, there's a requirement.
And I have one other question. The land that's going to the Johnson County Parks Department, is that all included in those 11 that are being, I forget what the term is, but that are ready to be given back, or you're asking for permission to give them back?
Well, no. So the areas that's going back to Johnson County, right, just has to be released by the current landowner, right? Those areas are considered clean. And so as soon as there's still a mortgage associated with the site. But for the most part, these areas will not be required or be affected by the mortgage, but it's at the time that Johnson County needs this property, they will need to discuss it with the current landowner. But these were not turned over, but these were identified to them, and these were already clean land. They were not contaminated.
Okay, thank you.
Back there, on the right.
You're describing what's been done to clean up the areas. Well, as we've watched these truckloads of contaminated soil and concrete and what have you come away from the site, where did they go? What was done with the contaminants?
Well, before they left the site, they were, in the case of concrete, if we did have a load of concrete going out, they were flashed dependent on where they came from on the site. So if there was a process, like an explosive hazard process, that in that particular section, and we went in and we took out the footings, we took out the walls, and we busted it up, we'll turn around and flash it in a way that we burn off whatever contamination or explosive hazard that's there. And once that's sufficiently burnt off to the chemical processes, and I don't know exactly how that works and to the degree that the heat needs to be in order to address or completely mitigate the explosive hazard. Once that occurs, then it's taken to the Johnson County landfill. Landfill, yes.
Landfill.
Yes. Any other questions?
Howdy, my name's Chad Tenpenny, and I'm with the Tenpenny Law Firm. Thank you, Mr. Thomas, for your professionalism in this presentation. I can tell you're a pro. Formerly, I worked for United States Senator Pat Roberts for many, many years, and then Senator Marshall. So we absolutely appreciate all the good work the Army's done under difficult circumstances.
Thank you.
You did mention that more funding is needed to complete the work, I guess, by 2028. Do you have a figure you could relate to the community? And then do you have any advice and counsel for us on how we go and identify that and make it a reality?
Okay, so we do estimates on a daily basis, weekly basis, and we estimate what it will cost to execute the remediation. We pass that estimate up to our leadership, to the budget folks, and they'll go through a process of reviewing all the requirements and establishing a budget for the next year. It's called the Program Objective Memorandum. It's a POM process that Department of Defense goes through. The estimate that we have submitted recently to execute the remaining remediation of the soils here at Sunflower is approximately $40 million. We have submitted that budget, but again, we are going to be competing against the entire Department of Defense and defense agencies for funding to address the remediation here at Sunflower. Whether we get all of that dollars is remain to be seen. What the community can do, I guess, understanding that I just identified that we will continue the remediation subject to availability of funds. The only thing that I see the community can do is just to, talk to their local officials, who would then talk to the state officials and the federal officials to say, hey, we have some progress that has occurred over the last 10, 15 years. Hopefully that progress is not stunted by lack of funding. And, if there's any way that you guys can help the Army, with additional funding or the funding that's necessary to complete the remediation at Sunflower. Oh, by the way, make them a little higher priority if you can. Easier said than done, obviously. But if the information is not put out there, then nothing will happen. We expect. Absolutely. We expect to get the funding, but again, anything can happen. With the environment the way it is, the fiscal environment the way it is, it wouldn't be a stretch to say that we may have to take a back seat to some other higher priority within the Department of Defense. Any other questions? Right here in the front.
I had 3 different questions, and they're based on rumors that I hear, so I want to make sure that they're right. And one you answered already, that all this contaminated stuff is trying to be cleaned and then taken to a landfill. So you're taking land from Johnson County and moving it to another part of Johnson County. And that's where the landfill is, right?
Right.
Okay. And the other is, you might have said it before, because I came a little later, that and here you mentioned that it was to residential standards. What I had heard, that all of it was being remediated to industrial standards. So if you could differentiate between the two and tell us which one it is, and in maybe different areas. The other thing I heard is that there was no work being done during the COVID years, at least 21, 22, maybe more. So if you could talk about that.
Okay, help me with those questions in a
Okay,
minute here.
which one?
But the COVID did not stop us from working.
Okay,
COVID only stopped us from getting together more often to discuss the activity that
but
we
the
had
active
ongoing.
work was being
Right.
done.
But active work was being done during COVID.
Okay.
The other question about the residential levels
Yeah, versus industrial.
versus
I was
industrial.
told it was
So
ongoing.
for the most part, we decided that Sunflower has a comprehensive land use plan, right, that calls for a mixture of industrial, commercial, and residential areas. We initially talked and executed cleanup based on those 3 areas. But over time, we defaulted to the residential standard level.
Okay.
So a lot of what we have done within the last 6 years have been cleanup to residential standards.
So all of it will be residential level?
Not all of it will be residential.
So currently in Panasonic, it's just industrial level,
Absolutely.
which is not
Well, no.
as strict as residential.
Well, let me take that back. Certain areas that currently the Panasonic footprint is on was cleaned up to residential standards,
Okay.
right?
So as they expand and you get other industrial facilities there, they will be cleaned up to residential?
Again, so we're complete with the cleanup at the footprint of at
Panasonic.
Panasonic. We continue to do the cleanup in other areas that will eventually be redeveloped for, for industrial purposes, commercial and or residential purposes. But again, we have decided as a corporate entity to clean up a majority of the site to residential standards because the difference between the two was negligible. Okay, so we cleaned up to residential, which is the higher standard. What gets done or built on that area, it's not up to us, but it could essentially be that we clean the site up, say 100 acres to residential standards, and just because of where it is, an industrial facility had to go there. So
Yeah.
that's the
It's the
take on
cleanest
it.
area. That's where Oz was going to go because it's the cleanest area. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions? Any more questions? Okay, hearing none. Folks, thank you very much. That concludes our presentation for today. We expect to have some information on the establishment of the RAB within the next month or so to provide. We will do another maybe similar meeting, but under the auspices of a restoration advisory board next year. We will continue to be available for questions about the remediation at Sunflower. And we strive to get this all completed by 2028. Go ahead, man.
Can we sign up to be on the advisory board?
Yes, you can sign up to showing your interest to be on the board, yes. And we will have an evaluation as we go along. There's supposed to be a number of community members that sit on the board, a number of government representatives that sit on the board, regulators, special interest groups. So, yes. The Army, along with the regulators, will decide exactly who will sit on the board. So we'll go through a process of evaluation. Okay. Folks, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Gave you back about an hour and a half of your time.